There are moments when the night seems to understand everything the heart refuses to say. The world grows quiet, not because emotions have faded, but because some feelings become too profound for ordinary words. In that silence, countless people lie awake wondering whether someone, somewhere, is thinking about them with the same intensity. Perhaps tonight you are one of them. Perhaps you have tried to convince yourself that it is time to let go, yet something inside you continues to whisper that the story is not over. That quiet voice is not always wishful thinking. Sometimes it is simply the part of you that recognizes what the mind keeps trying to deny. Love rarely arrives in the dramatic way people expect. It does not always announce itself with certainty or grand gestures. More often, it appears in lingering glances, conversations that stay in someone's mind long after they end, and an unexplainable pull that refuses to disappear even when distance grows between two people. The deepest emotions often hide behind hesitation because genuine affection has a way of exposing the most vulnerable parts of the human soul. Many people believe that if someone truly cared, they would never become distant. Yet, human psychology tells a more complicated story. There are hearts that move away not because love has vanished, but because the feelings have become overwhelming. When another person begins to matter deeply, every interaction suddenly carries greater emotional weight. A delayed reply feels significant. A misunderstanding becomes frightening. Silence becomes louder than words. The possibility of losing someone important awakens fears that had been sleeping quietly for years. The human mind is remarkable at protecting itself, even when that protection comes at the cost of happiness. Long before we consciously recognize danger, the unconscious begins preparing defenses. It remembers disappointments we thought we had forgotten. It stores memories of rejection, abandonment, and heartbreak far beneath our awareness. Then, when someone finally reaches the hidden places within us, those old memories quietly return, convincing us that history will repeat itself. This is why love can feel confusing. One part of the heart longs for closeness, while another desperately searches for an escape. The desire to be fully seen exists alongside the fear of being completely known. It is an invisible struggle that many people experience without ever understanding why. Someone who truly cares about you may suddenly become quieter than before. They may hesitate before expressing what they feel. They may appear uncertain at the very moment when their emotions are becoming strongest. From the outside, this behavior can look like indifference. From the inside, it often feels like emotional survival. Their silence is not empty. It is filled with questions they cannot answer and fears they cannot easily explain. Imagine standing at the edge of a bridge that leads toward everything you have ever wanted, while every painful memory from your past whispers that taking another step will only end in disappointment. This is how deep emotional attachment feels for many people. They are not running away from the person they love. They are running from the possibility of experiencing the same pain they once believed they would never survive again. The heart remembers what the mind forgets. Even after years have passed, emotional wounds continue shaping the way people respond to intimacy. A child who learned that vulnerability was unsafe often becomes an adult who struggles to trust genuine affection. Someone who experienced betrayal may constantly search for signs that history is about to repeat itself, even when there is no evidence that it will. Because of this, love often awakens hidden fears before it creates lasting peace. And the truly heartbreaking part is this. They may not even fully realize why they are behaving this way. The subconscious mind influences far more of our actions than most people ever recognize. Comment, still waiting. If you're holding on to someone who suddenly became quiet, yet deep inside you feel they still love you, understand this. A person can sincerely love you while at the same time unconsciously damaging the connection because, deep within, their nervous system associates love with emotional danger. They long for closeness, yet closeness awakens fear. They desire intimacy, yet intimacy brings vulnerability to the surface. So they begin sending confusing and inconsistent signals without fully understanding why they are doing it themselves. This is exactly why emotionally mature love demands patience much more than passion. Passion is simple. Almost anyone can desire another person intensely for a brief moment. But genuine love asks for something much more difficult from human beings. It asks them to slowly remove the emotional armor they have spent years wearing. It asks them to trust again after experiencing disappointment. It asks them to remain emotionally available even when uncertainty feels overwhelming. And for many individuals, that process feels deeply frightening because they have spent years constructing identities centered around emotional self-protection. You must also understand something incredibly important about silence. Silence is not always the absence of feeling. Sometimes silence is emotional processing taking place beneath the surface. Some people express their emotions immediately. Others retreat inward whenever emotions become too intense. They withdraw into their thoughts, into uncertainty, into inner conflict, especially those who have spent most of their lives suppressing vulnerability. Their silence is not always meant as punishment. Sometimes it is simply emotional survival. But this creates painful misunderstandings inside relationships. One person interprets silence as rejection, while the other experiences silence as protection. One feels abandoned, while the other feels emotionally overwhelmed. And little by little, two people who genuinely care about each other begin drifting apart. Not because love disappeared, but because fear became louder than honest communication. This is where so many people give up far too soon. They mistake emotional complexity for emotional absence. They assume love should always appear obvious, predictable, and effortless. But psychologically meaningful connections are rarely that simple. They activate the deepest layers of human identity. They force people to confront their shadow selves, the insecure, wounded, frightened parts hidden beneath confidence, pride, and emotional control. Carl Jung believed that authentic love often becomes a mirror, not merely a source of comfort, but a reflection of the unresolved self. And this is exactly why certain relationships feel spiritually powerful. They trigger emotional awakening. They reveal patterns you never recognized before. They expose your fear of abandonment, your habit of giving too much, your fear of not being enough, your constant need for reassurance, your hidden loneliness. Suddenly, another human being unknowingly becomes connected to the parts of your identity that you never realized were still carrying pain. And that very person may be experiencing the exact same emotional chaos at this very moment. They may lie awake at night, replaying every conversation they had with you, while pretending throughout the day that everything is completely normal. Type yes if you want me to reveal even more hidden psychology behind why they pull away. They may struggle every day against the urge to message you because emotional pride continues getting in the way. They may miss you more deeply than you could ever imagine while convincing themselves that distance is somehow necessary. And perhaps the saddest truth about human psychology is this. People often hurt the ones they love the most because those are the only people capable of truly hurting them in return. That realization changes everything once you begin seeing people through a psychological perspective instead of a purely emotional one. Suddenly, you stop interpreting every confusing behavior as proof that love is missing. Instead, you begin recognizing emotional defense mechanisms hidden beneath people's actions, the delayed replies, the emotional inconsistency, the moments of withdrawal after intimacy, the fear concealed behind emotional restraint. None of these behaviors are healthy when they remain unresolved, but they are profoundly human. And maybe this is the painful truth your heart needed to hear today. Not every emotionally distant person is emotionally empty. Some are simply emotionally exhausted after spending years surviving life behind a guarded heart. There are people walking through life carrying years of silent grief that nobody ever noticed, wounds they never spoke about, disappointments they never processed, and emotional burdens they learned to hide behind a calm smile. From the outside, they appear composed, independent, and unaffected, but beneath that calm exterior, they are fighting invisible battles every single day. When someone finally reaches their heart, it can feel both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Part of them longs to stay, while another part instinctively prepares to run because their past has taught them that love often comes with pain. That inner conflict is exhausting. It causes hesitation where there should be certainty, distance where there should be closeness, and silence where words are desperately needed. Understanding this does not mean accepting unhealthy behavior forever, but it does mean recognizing that human beings are often far more complicated than their actions suggest. Sometimes what appears to be emotional coldness is actually emotional overload. Sometimes what looks like indifference is fear disguised as self-protection. And sometimes the people who struggle the most to express love are the very ones who feel it most deeply, but simply do not know how to carry it without also carrying the weight of everything they have survived. There are people who have learned to appear emotionally independent because relying on others once shattered them. There are people who secretly long for warmth and affection, yet panic the moment they begin receiving it on a consistent basis. There are people who no longer know how to trust peaceful love because emotional chaos became the only thing that ever felt familiar. If this person genuinely loves you, the battle taking place inside them may be far deeper than you are able to see right now. But there is another side to this reality that you should never overlook. Love by itself is never enough without emotional growth. You cannot rescue someone from their unconscious patterns if they refuse to face themselves honestly. You cannot continue sacrificing your own emotional well-being while hoping your love will eventually heal another person's deepest fears. True connection requires shared emotional responsibility. Compassion is important, absolutely, but so is self-respect. Understanding another person's emotional wounds should never require you to completely abandon your own emotional needs. This is where emotional maturity becomes truly essential. Emotionally mature love does not beg for tiny pieces of affection. It does not slowly destroy itself, trying to prove its value. It does not endlessly chase someone while sacrificing its own dignity. Mature love understands patience without abandoning itself. It creates healthy space without becoming emotionally unavailable. It offers compassion without giving up personal boundaries. Sometimes the greatest expression of love is not forcing closeness, but allowing someone the emotional room they need to honestly confront themselves. Because real transformation can never be forced from the outside. A person changes only when their soul grows exhausted from repeating the same emotional cycles over and over again. Perhaps this connection entered your life not simply to give you love, but to awaken something deep within you psychologically. Perhaps it arrived to teach you the difference between unhealthy attachment and genuine emotional alignment. Perhaps it came to reveal how deeply you long for emotional reciprocity. Perhaps it appeared to force you to confront all the moments you ignored your own intuition simply because you were afraid of losing someone. Think carefully about this for a moment. Have there been times when your intuition quietly whispered the truth long before your mind was finally willing to accept it? Moments when you sensed their emotions underneath every word they spoke. Human beings are far more intuitive than they often realize. The subconscious mind is constantly reading emotional energy, body language, subtle emotional shifts, patterns of silence, eye contact, and nervous tension. Long before logic catches up with reality, the soul often already knows the truth. That is exactly why certain people remain emotionally unforgettable, not because they were flawless, but because they awakened something that had been sleeping inside you for years, and genuine awakening is almost never comfortable. Sometimes awakening arrives through longing. Sometimes it appears through confusion. Sometimes it comes through emotional distance that forces you inward. Sometimes it happens by missing someone so deeply that you are finally forced to confront the loneliness you had been hiding from all along. Pain serves a strange psychological purpose. It strips away comforting illusions. It exposes emotional truth. It reveals the places where healing is still waiting to happen. That is why some relationships completely transform your inner world, even if they never become fully stable in the external world. They force growth. They create awareness. They demand emotional evolution. And perhaps this person is standing at the edge of that transformation right now. Maybe they are slowly beginning to realize that emotional avoidance no longer protects them the way it once did. Maybe your absence has forced them to face feelings they spent so long trying to suppress. Comment Jung if Carl Jung's words on love and fear truly resonated with you today. Maybe they are finally starting to understand that authentic love cannot survive forever behind silence, distance, and pride. Because eventually every human being reaches a point where loneliness becomes heavier than vulnerability itself. And when that moment finally arrives, people begin to change. Not overnight, not perfectly, but gradually, one realization at a time. They begin recognizing the emotional walls they spent years building around themselves. They begin noticing how often fear quietly controlled their choices. They start realizing how many opportunities for genuine connection they unknowingly sabotaged while trying to protect themselves from future pain. And for the very first time, they begin understanding that emotional safety cannot exist without emotional openness. That realization changes everything. But while they continue navigating their own emotional awakening, you must continue honoring yours. Do not allow uncertainty to slowly destroy your sense of self-worth. Do not allow another person's emotional confusion to convince you that you are somehow difficult to love. The way a person responds to emotional intimacy often reveals far more about their relationship with themselves than it ever reveals about your worth as a human being. Many emotionally unavailable individuals are not holding back love because you are somehow undeserving. They hold it back because they are deeply afraid. Afraid of needing another person. Afraid of becoming emotionally dependent. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of losing their sense of control. Afraid of allowing someone to truly see the parts of themselves they keep hidden. Ironically, the more deeply they care, the more exposed and vulnerable they begin to feel. This creates a powerful inner conflict. They long for closeness while resisting it at the exact same time. They desire connection, yet instinctively pull away whenever that connection becomes too real. Unless they intentionally choose to heal these fears, they remain trapped in a constant struggle between longing and self-protection. But you are not meant to carry the emotional weight for two people. You can genuinely love someone with all your heart and still choose emotional stability for yourself. You can understand someone's psychological struggles without giving endless permission for emotional inconsistency or repeated hurt. Compassion should never require you to abandon yourself. This is one of the greatest lessons emotionally mature people eventually discover. Love should nourish your soul, not slowly consume your identity. It should help you grow instead of quietly diminishing your sense of self. And despite all of this emotional complexity, there are still relationships that are absolutely worth fighting for. Rare relationships where two people slowly learn each other's fears with kindness rather than criticism. Relationships where emotional defenses gradually dissolve instead of becoming stronger. Relationships where both individuals choose healing over pride and understanding over ego. These kinds of relationships are real, but they demand honesty, accountability, vulnerability, patience, and emotional courage. Above all else, they require two people who are willing to stop running from themselves, because every meaningful relationship eventually becomes a mirror, reflecting who we truly are. You cannot genuinely love another person while remaining completely disconnected from your own emotional reality. That is exactly why shadow work is so important. Shadow work is far more than a spiritual phrase. From a psychological perspective, it means honestly confronting the hidden parts of yourself, the jealousy you refuse to acknowledge, the fears you constantly hide, the loneliness you distract yourself from, the emotional habits you continue repeating without realizing it, the wounds you pretend have already healed even though they still influence your decisions every single day. Until people face these hidden parts with complete honesty, they continue recreating the same emotional pain in different relationships and different situations. Perhaps this person is finally beginning to face those hidden parts because of you. Perhaps your love became impossible to ignore, too authentic, too emotionally genuine, too psychologically transformative to simply walk away from without feeling something profound. And even if they have not completely figured themselves out yet, something deep inside them recognizes that your connection carries real significance. Human beings rarely experience this level of emotional struggle over someone who means absolutely nothing to them. Genuine emotional conflict usually exists where genuine attachment already exists. That is why indifference feels simple, quiet, and emotionally distant, while love often feels layered, complicated, and intensely alive. If someone truly does not care, Their emotional energy becomes flat and predictable. There is very little emotional movement. But when someone deeply loves you while also fighting their own fears, their energy becomes inconsistent, emotionally charged, confusing, and incredibly intense. You can often feel their internal battle even when they say nothing at all. You have probably sensed this already, that invisible emotional pull, that unfinished feeling that never completely disappears, that strange intuitive awareness telling you that beneath all the silence, something meaningful still remains. Maybe you have questioned yourself over and over because of it. Maybe a part of you keeps asking whether you are imagining everything, but deep emotional intuition rarely appears without some underlying reason. The human subconscious constantly notices emotional truths that remain hidden beneath outward behavior. Even so, intuition should always be balanced with wisdom. Share this with someone who is constantly overthinking a silent connection right now. But never romanticize emotional suffering forever. Never become addicted to uncertainty simply because emotional intensity feels powerful or significant. Some people remain trapped inside painful relationship patterns because unpredictability itself becomes psychologically addictive. Their nervous system slowly adapts to emotional highs followed by emotional lows. After experiencing repeated chaos, peaceful and emotionally healthy love can initially feel unfamiliar or even unexciting. This is exactly why genuine healing transforms attraction. Emotionally healthy people no longer chase emotional confusion just to feel something. They begin appreciating consistency. They value emotional security. They prioritize honesty, trust, dependability, and inner peace. They stop mistaking emotional unavailability for emotional depth. They stop believing that suffering is the price of being loved. They no longer feel the need to prove their worth by endlessly chasing someone who cannot consistently choose them. Instead, they recognize that healthy love is not built through emotional exhaustion but through mutual effort, emotional responsibility, and genuine presence. As healing continues, their standards naturally begin to change. They become less impressed by mixed signals and more attracted to clear communication. They stop confusing unpredictability with passion and begin recognizing that true intimacy is created through reliability rather than emotional chaos.